Commander Hyun-woo rubbed his tired eyes as he stared at the glowing holographic display. The blue light from the screen had been his only companion for 3 long days in the classified archive chamber of the Galactic Military Academy. His coffee had gone cold hours ago, but he barely noticed. What he was seeing on the screen made no sense at all. The archive chamber was located deep underground, far from the main academy buildings where young cadets trained for their future battles among the stars. Down here, only the highest-ranking officers could access the most secret military files that contained the darkest moments in human military history. Hyun-woo had been assigned to review these files as part of a routine analysis. High Command wanted to understand why so many military operations had gone wrong in recent years. They hoped to find patterns that could help prevent future disasters. What Hyun-woo found instead was something much more disturbing. He scrolled through the list of incidents on his screen. The Proxima massacre, where 3,000 soldiers died in a single day. The siege of Kepler Station, which lasted 6 months and claimed 8,000 lives. The Battle of the Void Gates, where an entire fleet was destroyed. Each event was a nightmare that military historians still studied decades later. But one name appeared in every single survivor report. Lieutenant Kim Sora. At first, Hyun-woo thought it must be a mistake in the computer system, maybe different people with the same name. He checked the identification numbers, birth records, and service history. It was the same person every time. The same woman had survived every major military disaster of the past 23 years. Hyun-woo leaned back in his chair and tried to make sense of what he was seeing. The incidents had happened across 17 different star systems. Some were battles against alien forces. Others were civil wars between human colonies. A few were accidents caused by equipment failures or natural disasters. They had nothing in common except one thing. Kim Sora had been there for all of them. He pulled up her photograph from the military database. A woman in her mid-40s stared back at him from the screen. She had short black hair and dark eyes that seemed to look right through the camera. Her face showed no emotion at all. Even in her official military portrait, she looked completely calm. Hyun-woo read through her service record. Sora had joined the military as a young woman 25 years ago. She had started as a basic soldier and slowly worked her way up to lieutenant. Her record showed dozens of commendations for bravery and tactical thinking. Her superior officers consistently rated her performance as excellent. But the timeline made no sense. According to the records, Sora was currently 47 years old. The earliest warfare incident on his list happened when she should have been only 12 years old, yet there she was, listed as a survivor of the colony ship Arcturus disaster. The report described her as a civilian child who helped organize the evacuation of other passengers. Hyun-woo stood up and walked to the small window in the archive chamber. Outside, he could see cadets running training exercises on the academy grounds. Young men and women preparing to serve humanity among the stars. They looked so eager and hopeful. None of them could imagine the horrors contained in the files behind him. He returned to his desk and began reading the actual incident reports more carefully. The details were even more strange than the basic facts. In every case, Sora was not just a survivor. She was often the only survivor, or one of just a handful of people who lived through events that killed thousands. The report from Proxima described how Sora had been trapped in a command bunker with 12 other officers when enemy forces overran their position. The aliens had used poison gas to kill everyone in the area. When rescue teams arrived 3 days later, they found Sora alive and conscious. The other 12 officers were dead. Sora claimed she had found a sealed environment suit that protected her from the gas. The Kepler Station report was even more unusual. The station had been under siege for months. Food and water were running out. Disease was spreading through the cramped living areas. Of the 4,000 people on the station when the siege began, only 37 were still alive. When help finally arrived, Sora was one of them. She had been working as a supply coordinator, managing the distribution of the last remaining resources. Hyun-woo noticed something else strange about the reports. In each case, other survivors described Sora in almost identical ways. They said she had remained calm throughout the crisis. She never panicked even when things seemed hopeless. She made practical suggestions that helped people survive. Most importantly, she seemed to know what to do even when trained officers were falling apart. One report from the Battle of the Void Gates particularly caught his attention. The survivor interview was with a senior captain named Kang Tae-ho. He described how Sora, who was just a corporal at the time, had taken charge when their ship was boarded by enemy forces. She had organized the defense of the engine room and saved the lives of 23 crew members. Captain Kang wrote in his report, "Corporal Kim Sora displayed tactical knowledge far beyond her rank and experience. She seemed to anticipate enemy movements before they happened. Her commands were clear and precise. Even though I outranked her by many levels, I found myself following her orders without question. There was something about her voice during combat that made you want to trust her completely." Hyun-woo felt a chill run down his spine as he read those words. Something about her voice during combat. Other reports contained similar descriptions. Survivors consistently described Sora as becoming a different person when violence erupted around her. The calm civilian or low-ranking soldier would transform into someone who seemed to understand warfare at a level that should have been impossible. He pulled up Sora's current assignment. She was serving aboard the exploration vessel New Horizon, which was conducting survey missions in the Outer Rim territories. The ship was scheduled to return to Earth in 2 weeks. For the first time in days, Hyun-woo felt a spark of curiosity that was stronger than his growing fear. He needed to meet Kim Sora in person. He needed to look into those calm, dark eyes and ask her how someone could survive so many impossible situations. But more than that, he needed to understand why she kept volunteering for the most dangerous assignments the military had to offer. Because according to her service record, Sora had never once requested a transfer to safer duty. In fact, she actively sought out high-risk missions, 23 years of surviving the unsurvivable, and she kept going back for more. Hyun-woo saved his research files and prepared to contact his colleague Dr. Park Ji-won. This mystery was too big for one person to solve alone. If Kim Sora was what she appeared to be, she represented something unprecedented in human military history. If she was something else entirely, then humanity might be facing a threat they had never imagined. Dr. Park Ji-won arrived at the academy 3 hours after Hyun-woo called her. She was a tall woman with graying hair who specialized in studying how the human mind reacted to extreme stress and violence. Her expertise in xenopsychology had helped the military understand why some soldiers broke under pressure, while others seemed to thrive in combat situations. Hyun-woo met her at the entrance to the classified archive chamber. He looked like he had not slept in days. Dark circles surrounded his eyes and his uniform was wrinkled from hours of sitting at his desk. "Show me what you found," Ji-won said as they walked through the security checkpoints. Hyun-woo pulled up the files on his main display screen. The list of incidents glowed in the dim room. 23 separate events spread across 2 decades. Each one a disaster that had cost thousands of lives, and in every case, the name Kim Sora appeared in the survivor reports. Ji-won studied the data for several minutes without speaking. She was known for her careful analytical approach to problems. Other researchers might jump to quick conclusions, but she always examined every piece of evidence before forming her opinions. "This is impossible," she finally said. "The mathematical probability of one person surviving this many unrelated disasters approaches 0. Either these records are wrong, or we are dealing with something that defies normal explanation." Hyun-woo nodded grimly. "That is exactly what I thought, but I have checked and rechecked everything. The records are accurate. Kim Sora really did survive all of these incidents." Ji-won began reading through the individual incident reports. She took notes as she worked, writing down details that seemed important. After 2 hours of careful study, she looked up from her tablet. "I want to interview the other survivors," she announced. "If Sora really was present at all these events, there should be witnesses who remember her, people who can tell us what she was actually like during these crises." Over the next week, Ji-won conducted interviews with 37 survivors from various incidents. Some were retired military officers living on peaceful colony worlds. Others were still serving in active duty. A few had left military service entirely and were working as civilians. The first interview was with Captain Lee Min-ho, who had survived the Proxima massacre. He was now a colonel stationed at the Mars Defense Command. When Ji-won contacted him, he immediately agreed to speak with her via secure video link. "I remember Sora very clearly," Min-ho said when Ji-won asked about her. "She saved my life and the lives of 6 other people. We were trapped in a collapsed building for 4 days. The enemy was searching for survivors to capture or kill. Sora kept us quiet and organized. She seemed to know exactly when the enemy patrols were coming." Ji-won leaned forward in her chair. "Can you describe her behavior during the crisis?" Min-ho thought for a moment. "She was different from everyone else. The rest of us were scared and panicking. Some people were crying or praying. But Sora remained completely calm. She spoke in a quiet voice and gave us simple instructions. Follow me. Stay low. Do not make noise. Wait here. Her commands were so clear and confident that we obeyed without thinking about it. Did she seem to have special training or knowledge? Ji-won asked. That is the strange part, Min-ho replied. According to her rank and assignment, she was just a basic supply clerk. She should not have known anything about combat tactics or enemy patrol patterns. But she acted like she had been trained for exactly that situation. She made decisions that professional soldiers would struggle with. The second interview was with Sergeant Yoon Da-yoon, who had been on Kepler Station during the 6-month siege. Da-yoon was now working as a military instructor at a training facility on Europa. Sora was assigned to manage food distribution, Da-yoon explained over the video connection. It was a terrible job because there was never enough food for everyone. People were hungry and desperate. They would beg and threaten and sometimes try to steal extra rations. But Sora handled all of it without getting upset. Ji-won made notes as Da-yoon spoke. How did she manage to keep order among so many desperate people? She had a way of talking to people that made them trust her, Da-yoon said. Even when she had to tell someone they could not have more food, they accepted it. She would explain the situation in simple terms. She would show them exactly how much food was left and how long it needed to last. People understood that she was being fair, not cruel. Did anything else strike you as unusual about her? Da-yoon paused for a long moment. Yes. She never seemed hungry herself. The rest of us were always thinking about food. We dreamed about meals we had eaten before the siege. We talked constantly about what we would eat when the rescue ships arrived. But Sora never participated in those conversations. She ate her rations quickly and efficiently, like it was just another task to complete. As Ji-won conducted more interviews, a pattern began to emerge. Every survivor described Sora in remarkably similar terms. Calm under pressure, clear in her communication, practical in her thinking, and most importantly, completely focused on survival rather than emotional reactions. The interview that disturbed Ji-won the most was with Lieutenant Choi Woo-jin, who had served with Sora during the Battle of the Void Gates. He was currently recovering from injuries sustained in a recent training accident. Sora was the reason any of us survived that battle, Woo-jin said. Our ship was boarded by enemy forces. They were killing everyone they found. Our officers were dead or wounded. The chain of command had completely broken down. That is when Sora took control. What did she do? Ji-won asked. She organized us into small teams and gave each team specific objectives. Secure the engine room, protect the communication array, defend the medical bay. She coordinated all of our movements using the internal communication system. It was like she could see the entire battle from above and position us exactly where we needed to be. Ji-won frowned. That level of tactical coordination would require advanced training and experience. What was her rank at the time? Corporal, Woo-jin replied. She had been in service for less than 3 years. She should not have known how to do any of what she did. But when the shooting started, she became someone completely different. Her voice changed. Her posture changed. Even the way she moved became more efficient and purposeful. Can you describe the change in more detail? Woo-jin struggled to find the right words. Before the battle, Sora was just another young soldier, quiet and polite. She followed orders and did her job without complaining. But when the enemy boarded our ship, it was like watching someone put on a mask. Suddenly, she was giving orders to people who outranked her by many levels. And we all listened to her because Somehow we knew she understood the situation better than anyone else. After completing all the interviews, Ji-won returned to the archive chamber to share her findings with Hyun-woo. She spread her notes across the desk and pointed to the patterns she had identified. Every witness describes the same transformation, she explained. In normal circumstances, Sora appears to be an average soldier. But when violence erupts around her, she becomes something else entirely. Her emotional responses shut down while her tactical thinking becomes extremely advanced. Hyun-woo studied the interview summaries. It sounds like she has some kind of psychological adaptation to combat situations, but how is that possible? Ji-won shook her head. I have studied combat psychology for 15 years. I have never encountered anything like this. Most people either break under extreme stress or they develop coping mechanisms that help them function. But Sora seems to thrive in situations that would destroy normal people. What do you think we should do next? We need to access her medical and psychological evaluation records, Ji-won said. If she really has undergone this kind of transformation, there should be evidence in her test results, and we need to understand how long this has been happening. Hyun-woo pulled up Sora's complete service file. The medical section contained hundreds of pages of reports, evaluations, and test results. As they began reading through the documents, both researchers realized that the mystery of Kim Sora was far deeper and more disturbing than either of them had imagined. Dr. Ji-won spent 3 days reading through Kim Sora's medical files. The documents filled 2 entire computer storage drives. Every physical examination, psychological evaluation, and combat stress test from the past 25 years was recorded in careful detail. What she found made no sense at all. According to every medical report, Sora was a completely normal human being. Her blood tests showed standard hormone levels. Her brain scans revealed typical neural activity patterns. Her physical strength and reflexes were within normal ranges for a woman of her age and training level. Every doctor who examined her concluded that she was an ordinary soldier with no special enhancements or genetic modifications. But the psychological evaluations told a different story. Ji-won called Hyun-woo over to look at the test results displayed on her screen. Look at these stress response measurements, she said, pointing to a series of graphs and charts. This data was collected during combat simulation exercises. Hyun-woo studied the numbers carefully. These readings cannot be correct. Her stress hormone levels during combat scenarios are lower than most people experience during routine daily activities. That is not the strangest part, Ji-won continued. She pulled up another set of data. Look at her cognitive processing speeds during the same exercises. Her reaction times become faster, not slower, when she is placed in dangerous situations. Her decision-making accuracy improves dramatically when violence is involved. Hyun-woo leaned back in his chair. It is like combat makes her brain work better instead of worse. Exactly, and look at this. Ji-won opened a file containing brain scan images. These scans were taken before, during, and after combat simulations. Most people show increased activity in the emotional centers of their brain when faced with violence. Fear, anger, and panic create specific patterns that we can easily identify. She pointed to Sora's brain scans. But her emotional centers actually become less active during combat situations. At the same time, the logical and analytical portions of her brain show dramatically increased activity. It is as if she can shut off her emotions and become a pure, thinking machine. Hyun-woo studied the brain scan images. Even with his limited medical knowledge, he could see that Sora's neural patterns were completely different from normal human responses to stress and danger. How long has this been happening? He asked. Ji-won pulled up the earliest psychological evaluation in Sora's file. According to this report, she has shown these unusual patterns since her very first military assessment 25 years ago. But there are notes here suggesting that she displayed similar behavior even earlier. She found a section of the report that had been marked as supplementary information. The evaluating psychologist wrote that Sora mentioned experiencing her first combat situation as a 12-year-old civilian. She was aboard the colony transport ship Arcturus when it was attacked by pirates. Even as a child, she helped organize the evacuation of other passengers. The same incident that appeared in our original file search, Hyunwoo said grimly. Yes. And according to this psychological assessment, Sora described that childhood experience with the same emotional detachment she shows toward all combat situations. No trauma, no nightmares, no lasting emotional effects. She simply viewed it as a problem that needed to be solved. Ji-won continued reading through the files. Over the years, multiple military psychologists had noted Sora's unusual responses to stress and violence. Some had recommended her for advanced tactical training programs. Others had suggested that she might benefit from counseling to help her develop more normal emotional responses, but Sora had consistently declined both types of recommendations. When asked about her lack of emotional reaction to combat, she always gave the same response. Getting upset would interfere with her ability to think clearly and make good decisions. I think we need to observe her directly, Hyunwoo said after they finished reviewing the medical files. All of this data tells us what she is like, but we need to see it for ourselves. Ji-won agreed. They contacted the personnel office and arranged for Sora to be temporarily assigned to a routine training exercise at the academy. The exercise would simulate a hostile boarding scenario aboard a space station. It was designed to test how well soldiers could work together under pressure. Sora arrived at the academy 2 days later. Hyunwoo watched her through the security monitors as she walked through the main entrance. She moved with calm, measured steps. Her uniform was perfectly neat. Her expression showed no signs of curiosity or nervousness about her sudden reassignment. When Sora reported to the training facility, Hyunwoo and Ji-won observed her through hidden surveillance cameras. They wanted to see her natural behavior without her knowing she was being watched. The training exercise began with a briefing about the simulated scenario. 20 soldiers were divided into 4 teams. Their mission was to defend a space station against enemy forces trying to capture the facility. Sora was assigned to Team 3 as a basic squad member, not a leader. For the first 30 minutes of the exercise, Sora behaved exactly like the psychological reports suggested. She followed orders from her team leader without question. She moved carefully and efficiently through the training facility. She communicated clearly with her teammates using standard military protocols. Then the simulated enemy attack began. Hyunwoo and Ji-won watched in fascination as Sora underwent the transformation that survivors had described in their interviews. Her posture became more upright and confident. Her movements became faster and more precise. Most importantly, her voice changed when she began speaking to her teammates. Within minutes of the attack scenario beginning, Sora was effectively commanding her entire team despite holding the lowest rank among them. She issued tactical instructions that her team leader immediately adopted. She positioned her teammates in optimal defensive locations. She coordinated their response to enemy movements with mechanical precision. "Watch her face," Ji-won whispered to Hyunwoo. Sora's expression during the combat simulation was completely emotionless. No fear, no excitement, no anger. She eliminated simulated enemies with the same calm efficiency that most people use to perform routine office work. Every decision she made was based on pure logical analysis of the tactical situation. The most disturbing moment came when her team leader was eliminated by simulated enemy fire. Without hesitation, Sora took command of the team and began issuing new orders. Her teammates followed her instructions immediately, even though military protocol required them to defer to the next highest-ranking member. When the exercise ended, Sora's team had achieved complete success. They had eliminated all enemy forces, while suffering minimal casualties. The other 3 teams had sustained heavy losses and failed to complete their objectives. After the simulation, Hyunwoo and Ji-won confronted Sora privately in a secure conference room. They wanted to see how she would react when directly questioned about her unusual abilities. "We have been investigating your service record," Hyunwoo began carefully. "We noticed that you have survived an unusually large number of dangerous situations." Sora looked at them with the same calm expression she maintained during combat simulations. "Yes. I am aware that my survival rate is statistically unusual. I assumed someone would eventually notice the pattern." Ji-won leaned forward, in her chair. Can you explain how you have managed to survive so many incidents that killed thousands of other people? I understand what needs to be done in dangerous situations, Sora replied in a matter-of-fact tone. Most people allow their emotions to interfere with their thinking. Fear makes them act irrationally. Anger makes them take unnecessary risks. Panic makes them unable to process information clearly. And you do not experience these emotions? I experience them, but I do not allow them to control my behavior. When violence occurs around me, I focus completely on analyzing the situation and determining the optimal course of action. Emotional responses serve no useful purpose in combat scenarios. Hyunwoo studied Sora's face as she spoke. Her expression never changed. She discussed life and death situations with the same tone most people use to talk about the weather. How long have you been able to control your emotional responses in this way? Jiwon asked. Since I was 12 years old, Sora answered without hesitation. During the pirate attack on the Arcturus, I realized that being afraid would not help me survive. I made a conscious decision to focus on practical solutions instead of emotional reactions. The approach proved effective, so I continued using it. Do you ever feel guilty about surviving when others died? Sora considered the question for several seconds before responding. Guilt is another emotional response that serves no practical purpose. The people who died in those incidents made different choices than I did. Their deaths were unfortunate, but my survival does not diminish the value of their lives. Hyunwoo and Jiwon exchanged glances. They were speaking with someone who had fundamentally different responses to trauma and violence than any human being they had ever encountered. But Sora was still clearly human. The question was whether her unusual adaptation represented an evolution of human capabilities or, after their conversation with Sora, Hyunwoo could not sleep. He spent the night walking through the empty corridors of the academy, thinking about what they had learned. The woman they had interviewed seemed perfectly rational and intelligent. But there was something deeply unsettling about her complete lack of emotional response to violence and death. The next morning, he met Jiwon in the archive chamber. She looked as troubled as he felt. I have been reading about psychological adaptations to extreme trauma, Jiwon said as she pulled up research files on her computer. There is a theoretical condition that military psychologists have discussed, but never actually documented. They call it adaptive combat evolution. Hyunwoo sat down next to her. What does that mean? The theory suggests that repeated exposure to life-threatening violence can fundamentally rewire the neural pathways in the human brain. Instead of developing trauma responses like most people, a small number of individuals might adapt by enhancing their tactical thinking abilities while suppressing their emotional reactions. Jiwon showed him research papers written by leading experts in combat psychology. The idea is that some brains might evolve to treat violence as a puzzle to be solved, rather than a threat to be feared. This would create individuals who become more effective during combat situations instead of less effective. You think that is what happened to Sora? I think Sora might be the first documented case of this theoretical adaptation, Jiwon replied. Her brain has essentially rewired itself to optimize survival in violent situations. She has become a perfect tactical thinking machine. Hyunwoo studied the research papers. The concept was fascinating but also deeply disturbing. If this adaptation is real, then Sora represents a new stage in human evolution, a version of humanity specifically designed for warfare. Over the next few days, they dug deeper into Sora's service records and the incidents where she had survived. Jiwon began to notice patterns that she had missed during her initial investigation. Look at this, she said, pointing to a timeline she had constructed on her computer screen. I mapped out all of Sora's assignments and the major incidents that occurred during each assignment. Hyunwoo examined the timeline carefully. It looks like she always volunteers for high-risk missions. More than that, Jiwon said grimly. Look at the timing. In several cases, she requested transfers to specific assignments just weeks before major disasters occurred. It is as if she knew something was going to happen. They pulled up Sora's transfer requests and assignment preferences. The pattern was unmistakable. She consistently chose postings that would place her in the most dangerous possible situations: combat zones, unstable political regions, experimental missions with high failure rates. This cannot be coincidence, Hyunwoo said. Either Sora has incredible intuition about where trouble is likely to occur, or she is somehow connected to these incidents in ways we do not understand, Ji-won finished. They decided to access classified intelligence reports about the major incidents where Sora had survived. Many of these reports contained information that was not included in the standard military histories. Details about what had caused each disaster and who might have been responsible. What they found changed everything they thought they knew about Kim Sora. In the case of the Proxima massacre, intelligence reports suggested that enemy forces had received inside information about human defensive positions. Someone had provided detailed maps of the military installations and troop movements. The betrayal had allowed alien forces to strike at exactly the right moment to cause maximum casualties. The siege of Kepler Station had been prolonged because supply shipments kept getting intercepted by enemy forces. Intelligence analysts suspected that someone was providing information about supply routes and delivery schedules. Without these betrayals, the siege would have lasted weeks instead of months. The Battle of the Void Gates had been a disaster because human forces had walked into a carefully planned trap. Enemy ships had been waiting in exactly the right positions to ambush the human fleet. Once again, intelligence reports suggested that someone had provided advance warning about human tactical plans. "Look at this," Ji-won said, her voice shaking, as she pointed to a section of one intelligence report. In each case, investigators identified the same pattern. Someone with access to classified information was feeding intelligence to enemy forces, but they were never able to identify who was responsible. Hyunwoo felt a cold chill run through his body. "You think Sora was the source of the intelligence leaks?" "Think about it logically," Ji-won said. "She always volunteered for assignments where she would have access to sensitive information, supply coordination, communications, tactical planning. She was present at every incident, and she always survived when thousands of others died." They began examining Sora's specific roles during each incident more carefully. At Proxima, she had been working as a communications specialist with access to troop movement plans. During the Kepler Station siege, she had been managing supply distribution and would have known delivery schedules. At the Void Gates battle, she had been assigned to the tactical planning staff. But why would she do this? Hyunwoo asked. What could motivate someone to betray their own people repeatedly? Ji-won pulled up Sora's psychological profile again. Remember what we learned about her emotional responses. She does not feel guilt, fear, or attachment in normal ways. To her, these incidents might simply be tactical exercises. She creates scenarios that maximize casualties while ensuring her own survival. You are suggesting that she orchestrates these disasters deliberately. I think Sora has been using her tactical abilities to create the perfect combat situations for her own psychological needs, Ji-won said carefully. She does not just survive violence. She requires violence to feel like her true self. So she creates opportunities for the kind of large-scale combat scenarios where her abilities can shine. They accessed Sora's personal logs and private communications. Most military personnel kept detailed records of their thoughts and experiences during difficult assignments. These logs were considered private, but Hyunwoo's security clearance allowed him to access them for his investigation. What they found in Sora's personal files was more disturbing than either of them had imagined. Instead of emotional reflections or traumatic memories, Sora's logs read like clinical research reports. She documented each violent incident with scientific detachment, analyzing her own performance and noting areas for improvement. She wrote about human casualties the same way a scientist might record data from a laboratory experiment. One log entry from after the Proxima massacre was particularly chilling. The enemy response was more effective than anticipated. Higher casualty rates among human forces created optimal conditions for tactical decision-making. Personal stress responses remained minimal throughout the engagement. Consider similar scenarios for future assignments. Another entry from the Kepler Station siege read, "Extended duration of crisis situation allowed for detailed observation of human behavioral patterns under extreme stress. Most individuals showed predictable deterioration of logical thinking capacity Personal adaptation responses continued to improve with sustained exposure to life-threatening conditions. Hyunwoo and Ji-won read through dozens of these entries. Each one treated human death and suffering as data points to be analyzed and learned from. Sora showed no more emotional connection to her fallen comrades than a researcher studying laboratory animals. The most disturbing discovery came in Sora's most recent log entries. She had been documenting her awareness of their investigation from the very beginning. She knew that Hyunwoo was reviewing warfare incident files. She knew that Ji-won was interviewing survivors. She even knew about their plans to observe her during the training exercise. Her final log entry, written just hours before their confrontation, contained a chilling analysis. Investigators have identified the pattern of my survival rate and tactical adaptations. Direct questioning will likely occur within 48 hours. This situation presents interesting opportunities to study human responses to psychological uncertainty. We'll proceed with standard operational protocols. Standard operational protocols. As if betraying her own species and causing the deaths of thousands of people was simply part of her regular job duties. Ji-won closed Sora's personal files and looked at Hyunwoo. We are not dealing with a soldier who adapted to warfare. We are dealing with someone who has been deliberately creating warfare to serve her own psychological needs. What do we do with this information? Hyunwoo asked. Before Ji-won could answer, an alarm began sounding throughout the academy. Emergency lights flashed in the corridors outside the archive chamber. An automated voice announced that all personnel should report to designated security stations immediately. Hyunwoo checked his communication device and found an urgent message from Academy Command. Enemy forces had been detected approaching the Academy's star system. All available personnel were being mobilized for defensive operations, and according to the personnel assignments being distributed, Lieutenant Kim Sora had just volunteered to serve as a tactical coordinator for the Akadi. The Academy's command center was filled with activity as officers prepared for the incoming attack. Hyunwoo and Ji-won pushed through the crowded corridors, trying to reach Admiral Kang before the battle began. They needed to warn him about Sora before she could gain access to sensitive tactical information. But when they arrived at the command center, they found Sora already at work. She was standing at a large holographic display, coordinating defensive positions with calm efficiency. Officers who outranked her by many levels were listening to her recommendations and implementing her suggestions without question. Admiral Kang was studying sensor readings that showed enemy ships approaching the Academy's orbital defenses. Our intelligence suggests they have twice as many ships as we initially detected, he told his staff. Lieutenant Kim has proposed a defensive strategy that could help us overcome the numerical disadvantage. Hyunwoo stepped forward. Admiral, we need to speak with you privately about Lieutenant Kim. Our investigation has revealed some concerning information. Sora looked up from the tactical display. Her expression showed no surprise at seeing Hyunwoo and Ji-won. Admiral, Commander Hyunwoo and Dr. Park have been investigating my service record. They have some interesting theories about my survival rate in previous combat situations. Admiral Kang frowned. This is not the time for personnel reviews. We have an enemy fleet approaching, and I need every experienced officer focused on our defense. That is exactly the problem, Ji-won said urgently. We have evidence that suggests Lieutenant Kim may have been responsible for intelligence leaks in previous conflicts. She should not have access to our defensive plans. Sora turned to face them directly. That is a serious accusation. Do you have proof of these intelligence leaks? The question caught Hyunwoo off guard. They had found patterns and correlations in their investigation, but no direct evidence that Sora had actually betrayed military secrets. Everything they had discovered was based on analysis and theoretical connections. We have documented patterns that suggest, Hyunwoo began. Patterns are not proof, Sora interrupted calmly. You found that I have survived many combat situations. You found that I volunteer for dangerous assignments. You found that I perform well under pressure. None of these facts constitute evidence of wrongdoing. Admiral Kang looked back and forth between them. Commander, if you have specific evidence of treason, present it now. Otherwise, I need Lieutenant Kim to continue her work on our defensive strategy. Hyunwoo realized that they were trapped. All of their suspicions were based on circumstantial evidence and psychological analysis. They could not prove that Sora had deliberately caused any of the disasters where she had survived. Sora returned to her work at the tactical display. "The enemy fleet will reach firing range in 37 minutes, she announced to the command staff. "I recommend concentrating our defenses around the Academy's main orbital station. If we can force them to attack us in waves rather than all at once, our chances of survival improve significantly." The battle began exactly as Sora had predicted. Enemy ships emerged from hyperspace in 3 separate groups, just as she had calculated. The Academy's defensive forces engaged the first wave while preparing for the subsequent attacks. Hyunwoo and Jiwon watched the battle unfold on the command center displays. Sora coordinated the defense with the same mechanical precision they had observed during the training exercise. She issued tactical instructions in a calm, clear voice while explosions lit up the space around the Academy. The first wave of enemy ships was destroyed with minimal casualties among the Academy's forces. Admiral Kang congratulated Sora on her tactical planning. The second wave was also defeated, though the Academy's ships sustained more damage. But during the third wave of attacks, something went wrong. Enemy ships suddenly changed their approach pattern, attacking from directions that the Academy's defenses were not prepared for. It was as if they had detailed knowledge of the defensive strategy that Sora had developed. "How did they know to avoid our primary firing positions?" Admiral Kang demanded, as Academy ships began taking heavy casualties. Sora studied the tactical display with apparent confusion. "Their attack pattern suggests they received updated intelligence about our defensive arrangements. Someone must have provided them with information about our plans." Hyunwoo felt his suspicions crystallize into certainty. Sora had orchestrated this entire situation. She had volunteered to coordinate the defense so that she could provide the enemy with exactly the information they needed to maximize casualties. But he still could not prove it. The battle continued for 6 hours. By the time the enemy fleet was finally defeated, the Academy had lost 2/3 of its defensive ships and nearly 1,000 personnel. It was exactly the kind of large-scale disaster that Sora seemed to attract wherever she served. When the shooting finally stopped, Admiral Kang called a meeting to analyze what had gone wrong with their defensive strategy. Sora attended the meeting and provided detailed analysis of the enemy's tactics. She suggested that future defensive plans should account for the possibility of intelligence leaks. After the meeting, Hyunwoo and Jiwon cornered Sora in an empty conference room. They had decided to confront her directly with their suspicions, even without concrete proof. "You provided the enemy with our defensive plans," Hyunwoo accused. Sora looked at him with the same calm expression she always maintained. "That is an interesting theory. How do you think I managed to communicate with an enemy fleet without being detected by Academy security systems?" "You found a way," Jiwon said. "You always find a way to ensure that maximum casualties occur while you survive." "And why would I want to cause casualties among my own people?" Sora asked. The question hung in the air between them. Hyunwoo realized that they were about to have the conversation that would reveal the true nature of Kim Sora. "Because you need violence," Jiwon said quietly. "You have adapted to warfare so completely that you can only feel like yourself when people around you are dying. You create these situations because they allow you to experience the psychological state that your brain has evolved to crave." Sora considered this analysis for several seconds. "That is a fascinating psychological theory. You believe that I have become addicted to combat situations in the same way that other people become addicted to drugs or alcohol." "Exactly," Hyunwoo said. "You are a predator who disguises herself as a protector. You cause disasters so that you can experience the satisfaction of surviving them." For the first time since they had met her, Sora's expression changed slightly. A small smile appeared at the corners of her mouth. "You have spent weeks investigating my service record and interviewing witnesses," she said. "You have analyzed my psychological evaluations and medical reports. You have constructed an elaborate theory about my motivations and methods, but you have missed the most important question." "What question?" Jiwon asked. Sora's smile became more pronounced. You have never asked whether my actions have been successful in serving humanity's military interests. She pulled up data files on her portable computer and displayed them on the conference room screen. Every conflict where I have survived has resulted in valuable intelligence about enemy capabilities and tactics. Every disaster has taught our military forces important lessons about defensive strategies and crisis management. The data showed tactical innovations and strategic improvements that had been implemented based on lessons learned from the incidents where Sora had survived. These improvements had saved thousands of lives in subsequent conflicts. My survival rate is not a statistical anomaly, Sora continued. It is the result of careful planning and tactical excellence. I place myself in situations where I can gather the most valuable intelligence while ensuring that the information reaches our military command structure. By causing the deaths of your own people, Hyunwoo said. By accepting that some deaths are necessary to prevent much larger numbers of deaths, Sora corrected. I make decisions that prioritize the long-term survival of humanity over the short-term survival of individuals. She stood up and walked to the conference room window, looking out at the debris field left by the recent battle. You want to know? If I provided intelligence to the enemy fleet that attacked us today, she said without turning around. The answer is yes. I calculated that allowing them to inflict specific types of damage would provide our forces with crucial information about their weapons systems and tactical preferences. Hyunwoo and Jiwon stared at her in shock. She had just admitted to treason, but she spoke about it as casually as discussing the weather. 1,000 people died because of your decision, Jiwon said. 3,000 people would have died if I had not provided the enemy with selective intelligence that allowed me to predict and counter their primary attack strategies, Sora replied. The casualties we sustained today were unfortunate but necessary. She turned to face them again. You think I am a monster because I can make these calculations without being paralyzed by emotional reactions. But someone has to make these decisions. Someone has to be willing to sacrifice the few to save the many. And you appointed yourself to make those choices? Hyunwoo spent 3 sleepless nights thinking about his conversation with Sora. Her admission that she had deliberately provided intelligence to enemy forces should have made his decision simple. She was a traitor who had caused the deaths of thousands of people. She should be arrested, court-martialed, and imprisoned for the rest of her life. But the situation was far more complicated than that. He and Jiwon had spent days analyzing the tactical improvements that had resulted from the incidents where Sora had survived. Her claims about serving the greater good were not empty justifications. The intelligence gathered from those disasters had genuinely saved lives in subsequent conflicts. The defensive innovations developed after the Proxima massacre had prevented similar attacks on 12 other colonies. The supply chain protocols, created following the Kepler station siege, had shortened 3 other sieges, saving thousands of civilian lives. The tactical lessons learned from the Battle of the Void Gates had given human forces decisive advantages in 4 major space battles. She is right about the results, Jiwon said as they reviewed the data together. However disturbing her methods might be, the intelligence she has provided has served humanity's military interests. Hyunwoo stared at the statistical analysis displayed on their computer screens. But she is still causing the deaths of innocent people to achieve those results. How can we justify that? The question is whether we can justify stopping her, Jiwon replied grimly. If Sora is correct about her tactical assessments, removing her from active service might lead to even more deaths in future conflicts. They had been wrestling with this moral dilemma for days when Admiral Kang summoned them to a private meeting. The Admiral's office was located in the highest tower of the Academy, with windows that provided a clear view of the ongoing recovery operations from the recent battle. I have been reviewing your investigation into Lieutenant Kim, Admiral Kang said as they sat down across from his desk. Your findings raise some troubling questions about her role in previous military incidents. Hyunwoo chose his words carefully. We found evidence suggesting that Lieutenant Kim may have been involved in intelligence activities that contributed to casualties in those incidents. But you also found that those same incidents provided valuable intelligence that has saved lives in subsequent conflicts, Admiral Kang observed. Your report makes it clear that the tactical innovations resulting from these disasters have been crucial to our military effectiveness. The Admiral pulled up classified files on his computer display. What you may not know is that High Command has been aware of Lieutenant Kim's unusual capabilities for several years. We have been monitoring her activities and analyzing the results of her assignments. Yunwoo and Jiwon exchanged glances. They had assumed their investigation was uncovering hidden information, but it seemed that military leadership had been conducting their own assessment of Sora's role. Are you saying that High Command has been allowing her to cause these disasters deliberately? Jiwon asked. I am saying that High Command has been struggling with the same moral questions that you have identified, Admiral Kang replied. Lieutenant Kim represents a unique asset for our military forces. Her tactical abilities and psychological adaptations make her extraordinarily valuable in warfare situations. The Admiral stood up and walked to the window overlooking the academy grounds. But her methods raise serious ethical concerns. She is willing to sacrifice human lives to achieve tactical objectives in ways that violate our normal moral standards. What decision has High Command reached? Hyunwoo asked. Admiral Kang turned back to face them. We have decided to transfer Lieutenant Kim to a specialized unit where her capabilities can be utilized, while her activities are carefully monitored. She will be assigned to missions that play to her tactical strengths, while limiting her potential for causing unnecessary casualties. The solution was a compromise that satisfied no one completely, but addressed the practical realities of their situation. Sora would continue to serve in the military, but under conditions that would prevent her from orchestrating the large-scale disasters that had characterized her previous assignments. What kind of missions will she be assigned? Jiwon asked. Deep reconnaissance operations in hostile territory, Admiral Kang explained. Solo assignments where her survival skills and tactical abilities will be valuable, but where she will not have access to information that could be used to harm other human forces. It was an elegant solution to an impossible problem. Sora would be placed in situations where she could satisfy her psychological need for combat and danger while serving legitimate military objectives. Her unique capabilities would continue to benefit humanity's military efforts without creating opportunities for the betrayals that had marked her previous service. 2 days later, Hyunwoo and Jiwon met with Sora one final time before her transfer to the new specialized unit. She listened to the explanation of her new assignment with the same calm expression she maintained in all situations. This assignment will isolate me from other personnel while utilizing my tactical abilities, she said, after they finished explaining the arrangement. It is a logical solution to the concerns raised by your investigation. How do you feel about being separated from other soldiers? Jiwon asked. Sora considered the question. I have never formed emotional attachments to my fellow soldiers in the way that most people do. My psychological adaptations make it difficult for me to experience the social bonds that other humans value. This assignment will simply formalize the isolation that already exists. Do you have any regrets about the casualties that resulted from your previous actions? Hyunwoo asked. Regret is an emotional response to past decisions that cannot be changed, Sora replied. I made tactical choices based on the information available to me at the time. Those choices achieved their strategic objectives while minimizing total casualties over the long term. Experiencing regret about those decisions would serve no useful purpose. As she prepared to leave for her new assignment, Sora offered them a final observation. You investigated my service record because you found my survival rate statistically impossible, but you discovered something more important than just one soldier's unusual abilities. She paused at the door of the conference room. Humanity is evolving to meet the challenges of warfare among the stars. I represent one possible direction for that evolution, a version of humanity that can make the hard choices that traditional human morality makes difficult. And you think that evolution is necessary? Hyunwoo asked. I think it is inevitable, Sora replied. The universe is filled with species that want to destroy or conquer humanity. We can either adapt to meet those threats, or we can maintain our current moral standards and risk extinction. She looked directly at both of them. You have the luxury of moral uncertainty because people like me are willing to sacrifice our humanity to preserve yours. Someone has to be willing to become the monster so that others can remain human. After Sora left, Hyunwoo and Jiwon remained in the conference room for another hour, discussing the implications of what they had learned. Their investigation had solved the mystery of the recurring survivor, but it had raised much larger questions about the future of human warfare. "Do you think we made the right decision?" Jiwon asked as they finally prepared to leave. Hyunwoo considered the question carefully. "I do not know if it was right, but I know it was necessary. And perhaps that is the most human thing about this entire situation. We are willing to live with the moral consequences of our choices, even when those choices disturb us." 3 months later, Hyunwoo received a classified report about Sora's first mission with her new specialized unit. She had successfully infiltrated an enemy installation and gathered intelligence that prevented a major attack on a human colony. The mission had been completed with no human casualties except for Sora's target. The report noted that Sora had performed flawlessly during the assignment. She had demonstrated the same tactical excellence and emotional control that had characterized her previous service. But most importantly, she had achieved her objectives without orchestrating the large-scale disasters that had marked her earlier career. Hyunwoo filed the report in his personal records and tried not to think about what Sora might be doing. At that moment, alone in hostile territory, serving humanity's interests through methods that most humans could never accept. 6 months later, Jiwon published a research paper about psychological adaptations to extreme combat stress. The paper became required reading at military academies throughout human space. It discussed the theoretical possibility of individuals who could function effectively in warfare situations that would destroy normal human psychology. The paper never mentioned Sora by name, but it established the scientific framework for understanding soldiers who might possess similar capabilities. It also raised important questions about the ethical use of such individuals and the moral responsibilities of military commanders who might encounter them. A year after their investigation concluded, Hyunwoo was promoted to colonel and assigned to oversee other classified research projects. He occasionally received updates about Sora